Welcome to the Oracle GoldenGate YouTube video series. Oracle GoldenGate is the industry's premier multi-cloud technology for building real-time data fabrics, data mesh, and data replication solutions. With class-leading, high-throughput, and extremely low-latency streaming data, Oracle GoldenGate is in a league of its own. Thousands of customers in over 180 countries globally trust GoldenGate with their most important data, and GoldenGate is consistently rated as a top leader for data integration and enterprise data fabrics. One key reason that GoldenGate is one of the most successful integration tools in history is the consistent innovation over more than 20 years. GoldenGate has notched many industry firsts for modern event-driven streaming data solutions. Oracle GoldenGate is first and foremost known for its data event capabilities, including long-time leadership for data high availability, transaction replication, and change data capture. More recently, since 2015, the most successful areas of GoldenGate have been in the areas of data pipelines and stream analytics. Modern technology solutions demand real-time data ingestion, streaming ETL for low latencies, and best-of-breed analytics on data in motion. GoldenGate delivers modern time series analysis in a no-code development package with enterprise-class data governance, including best-in-class data security, data verification, and a rich metadata catalog. Another reason that GoldenGate is so successful is that it is truly a tool for all enterprises, supporting a huge variety of common databases, applications, NoSQL data stores, clouds, and messaging systems in a powerful low-latency data fabric. GoldenGate's modern microservices architecture is the foundation of real-time data events for the event-driven business. With an easy-to-use browser-based user interface and available cloud services for just pennies per hour, there's nothing stopping you from realizing the future today. Try GoldenGate for free. Follow this link for more information. And now, onwards to the video you came for.
So as I mentioned, my name is Mac Bell. I'm on the GoldenGate product management team with everybody else that's been presenting today. So I do want to talk about GoldenGate for non-Oracle, and I'll do part one, and then like I said, Warner's going to talk about GoldenGate for DB2 and GoldenGate for Mainframe. So here are our topics today, just some few little short topics. I know everyone wants to see the roadmap, so I'll cover that at the end. But before I get to there, I do want to talk about what GoldenGate for non-Oracle is. And actually, if you know about licensing, the licensed name of the products that we have for GoldenGate, there's the GoldenGate for Oracle that supports the Oracle database. That's just actually called GoldenGate as far as a license term goes. But there is a license called GoldenGate for non-Oracle databases. And that's typically what I support on the PM side with a few variations or deviations. But what is GoldenGate for non-Oracle? So for that license, it includes DB2 for I, DB2 LUW, Informix, MySQL, and variants such as MariaDB, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, Sybase, Teradata, and TimesGen. And I've got some of the currently supported versions of those databases in red, in brackets next to each of those databases listed. It also supports the some of the third-party versions of those databases, such as Aurora, MySQL, and Postgres, Amazon RDS. We support the MariaDB, MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server for them, as well as some of the Azure databases. And we're starting to ramp up our support of Google GCP database services. And right now we support PostgreSQL for delivery only. So we are looking into that environment for some more support, but this is what our current support is of these, of the Google offerings. On the mainframe, so there's also a license called GoldenGate for Mainframe. And what that includes is the DB2 for ZOS and the HP NonStop systems. So those are really two distinct licenses under the, I kind of just call it the GoldenGate for non-Oracle bucket, but the actual license has different databases that it does support. So how do I get it? So this is, I put this here, it might be kind of a simplistic slide, but I do get a lot of questions on this. In fact, we had one earlier in Q&A. But GoldenGate, for the most part, has always been the classic architecture up until GoldenGate 12.3, when for the Oracle database they introduced the microservices architecture. And the classic architecture, and it still exists, we've all announced it that it's been deprecated, but it does still exist, and it's just a zip file, basically. You can get it on OTN, you can get it on eDelivery, and patches for both classic and microservice architecture are all on support.oracle.com, or as we call it, MOSS, My Oracle Support. So whenever you have a patch, you're going to get it from the My Oracle Support site. And the patches for classic architecture can just simply be overlaid, if you want, on top of the existing infrastructure. But for the microservices builds, and I'll go into those, what was introduced for 21C for non-Oracle as far as microservices. The microservices builds do require a base install. So for our 21C release, I think we've got a 21.3 is the version string that's the base install. And then you use OPatch on top of that to install the patches for microservices. So wanted to bring up that distinction. It's pretty important. And we do have documentation on this and how to patch and how to upgrade. We call patching is when you're going to go from, say, 21.3 to 21.4 GoldenGate, but an upgrade is 19.x to 21.x, for example. Those instructions are documented in our docs, so I've got a link here below, and you can see it when we post these slides. You'll be able to get to that link. So going into some of the features that we came out, I'll include the 19C as a recap for some of the features, and then I'll go into 21C features for non-Oracle as well. So what did we do for 19C? So as mentioned, I think it was on Alex's presentation that 19C was a long-term support release for GoldenGate, and we did have a huge feature set as well as platform set that we introduced with the 19C for non-Oracle. So for MySQL, for example, we added support for their 8.0 DB, as well as the MySQL database service, which is an OCI, DBaaS service running in the Oracle Cloud. We added the delivery support to that service back in a specific patch version of 19.1. And that's, if you look at that patch string for the MDS, you can see it ends in a .210420. That's actually the date of the build. So that was April 20th of 2021, and the plus sign just means anything after that. So any patch version after that will also support that, but that's the minimum version, for example, that will support MDS delivery. In 19C, we also came out with Postgres capture. So this was brand new for us up until I think I think it was either GoldenGate 21 or 21.2. No, sorry, GoldenGate 12.1 or 12.2 that had delivery to Postgres, but we never had Postgres capture. So we added that in GoldenGate 19C, and that supports database versions of Postgres from 10 and above. So at the time with 19C, I think we only had version 10, 11, and 12 for capture support. And now we've got, with our GoldenGate 21C, we support more versions, and I'll get into that as well. But as well as supporting capture just for an on-prem Postgres, we also support it for Amazon Aurora, Amazon RDS, and for Azure Database for PostgreSQL. SQL Server, and the SQL Server side, we in 19C, we added support for SQL Server 2019, as well as we introduced Linux builds for GoldenGate for SQL Server. So starting in 19C, we have a lot of customers that have a lot of Linux environments, and they wanted to use GoldenGate hubs to install, GoldenGate for DB2, GoldenGate for Oracle, GoldenGate for MySQL. So starting in 19C, we were able to add a Linux build. So that meant at the time that you can install GoldenGate on Linux, and it supports SQL Server running on Windows. So I'll get into more about SQL Server running on Linux. I'll get into that later. But that was one of the big features we introduced for SQL Server in the 19C, as well as our 19C CDC extract was introduced in 12.3 for SQL Server, and we made significant improvements over that in 19.1. So and on top of that, within 19.1, we make more and more improvements with patches that have come out since the initial release. So if you are on 19.1 and you're using the CDC extract for SQL Server, please look at which version you're using. Look at the release notes that we publish online and see if some of the, with some of the latest patches, if there's been any improvements listed that may help you out with performance. Sybase, we added Sybase. This was done after the initial GA release, but we did add Sybase back into the product fairly recently, actually, and we added it to support Sybase 15.7 and 16.0. We had formerly been on a hiatus with Sybase since GoldenGate 12.2, so it's good to get it back into the 19.1 code. And we're kind of kicking it around, based on probably looking at the feedback that you provided today on the first poll, kicking around, to see if we want to look at it for the 21C product. And Teradata, we added new 17.0. That was new back in 19C, so we added support for that. And same with times 10. They had come out with version 18.1 back in the time frame that we released 19C, and they also had scale-out architecture that we now support as well. So, and like I said, I've got the link to the full release notes, and once these slides are available, you can actually see the link details. Now, getting into GoldenGate 21C for non-Oracle, we've had a lot of talk about microservices on Alex's presentation and Dennis's presentation, so you can tell it is very important for the corporation and for our product. So we did introduce, beginning with GoldenGate 21C, we did introduce microservices architecture for some, not all yet, but for some of the platforms that are non-Oracle. Those are MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server. And, a little bit, it's the front end, as Dennis mentioned on his, he gave, when he was walking through, or Julian was walking through, going through the Snowflake demo, the front end is the same. I mean, it's the same web UI, it's the same architecture, it's very similar if you've already used the GoldenGate microservices for Oracle. So the look and feel is the same. There'll just be some slight differences. For example, when you're adding an extract, you're not going to see something called an integrated extract, for example. That's only specific for the Oracle database. So you may notice some slight differences that way. Also, when you're building out credentials to establish the database connection strings, you'll see different prompts based on the database that we support for that microservice implementation, for example. And as Volker mentioned, we have a migration utility that supports migrating from the classic architecture for that patch version listed from July of 2020. And you've heard it over and over that we've also deprecated the classic architecture for SQL Server, MySQL, and Postgres starting in 21C, which is when we released the microservices. But there's been no definitive answer on when we plan to desupport it. So I just wanted to desupport the classic architecture. Another big feature that we introduced, and this actually covers all of GoldenGate for non-Oracle, that we introduced the parallel Replicat. So if you're familiar with GoldenGate for Oracle, they've produced or provided a new type of Replicat, and I believe it was back with GoldenGate 12.3, and it's called parallel Replicat. And so it can handle multiple threads in one Replicat parameter file. It has mappers and appliers. I won't go into the detail of the underpinnings of the parallel Replicat. Those are available in our documentation to talk about the different the actual development of it. But I do want to say that we did introduce it now with 21.c. The performance characteristics of it do depend on workloads and your environment, so I highly recommend that you bench test this. So if you're already using either the classic Replicat or a coordinated Replicat and you want to investigate the parallel Replicat, it's worth your while to set up a UAT environment and actually run some workload, your workload, not just any workload, because it does vary, based on foreign key dependencies, transaction width, table width. There are some variations in workloads that can impact how it performs. So I would highly recommend that you take this if you're considering looking at the parallel Replicat to work in your environment and to bench test it. A little more some of the details to the specifics of MySQL and SQL Server that we released in 21C. One of the big things for MySQL was that we now have a bin log-based DDL replication support. So for GoldenGate for non-Oracle, the only platform that supports DDL replication is our MySQL platform, and I'll get into some roadmap items coming up regarding the other platforms. But that implementation, when we first came out with it, used a plugin. That was a little, to configure it may have been a little difficult, and there's some history tables that have to be cleaned up, et cetera, et cetera. So starting with GoldenGate 21C, and it does require database, MySQL database 8.0. We do now use bin log-based DDL replication. So implementing it and managing it is much easier than before. We added also JSON data type support. So most of these, if not all of the major relational database systems now have some form of JSON data type available. So we've been working to make sure we're up to speed on that with our products as well. So we've added that support started in 21C for MySQL, as well as I mentioned in GoldenGate 19C, we introduced delivery support to the MySQL database service. We now have, starting in GoldenGate 21, we now have capture support of that as well. So that was a big work, and since the MySQL team, works at Oracle, so we were able to get a lot of the help we needed from their team and get this implemented in 21C. And for SQL Server, I mentioned that in 19C we had builds of GoldenGate for SQL Server that run on Linux. Well, starting in GoldenGate 21C, we can now support SQL Server 2019 that runs on Linux. So whether you're going to run GoldenGate on Windows or GoldenGate on Linux in 21C, we can support SQL Server on Linux. So I didn't have that in a poll, but if anyone is actually using that, SQL Server running on Linux, I would be curious if you wouldn't mind just putting something in the Q&A about it. That, just maybe let me know that you use it. I would appreciate that. We also continuously work to improve our capture rate throughput. So we have made some improvements in 21C for that. So if you haven't already, I might suggest you to start investigating looking at 21C. For GoldenGate for SQL Server. Not only does it have the the microservices architecture and the parallel Replicat, but there are also other improvements that come in line with 21C. Let me move on. I'm going to, we will have these slides available so you can see some of the other details of the support that we have in 21C. Also, I want to mention some of the other platforms for Postgres. We did add support for Postgres versions 13 and 14, so we can now capture and deliver for those versions. I mentioned earlier that we support delivery to PostgreSQL GCP, Google GCP, so that was added with GoldenGate 21C, as well as JSON support, JSON data type support for PostgreSQL was added. And Teradata, Teradata team released database version 17.10. I forgot, it was sometime last year, and we were able to support that when it came out, as well as they added support for TLS 1.2, which was, I forgot the timeline on that, but we supported that as well. And Times 10 introduced version 22.1 recently, and we were able to switch over to get our QA team to sign off on that. It's pretty much soon as they came out with it. Another topic I want to get into is, so even though we're at a 21C release and we started out with a 21.1 version and then we had a 21.3 version, we do continue with patches for these things. So the patching nomenclature for the 21C product line is a little different than it was for 19C. In the 19C product line, our patches ended in a dot with a year, month, day. So you saw earlier I had a dot 200714, or whatever the specific dates were. That was to kind of follow a calendar release as far as the naming convention. But in GoldenGate 21C, we've gone back to the second digit increase is now going to be the patch patch versions for GoldenGate 21C. So right now, our current level is GoldenGate 21.5. That's our current patch. We're about to come out with a 21.6 in the month of April, and then after that, we target to kind of have quarterly releases. But we still do add new features into the product, into these patches, and often we do update the versions of the databases that we support from the vendor. So this is just kind of a brief mention of some of those features. But if you look at our release notes when they come out, we'll also mention new features in there, what came out. And at the end of this slide, there's going to be a link to the certification matrices that are kind of the point of truth for what versions of databases we support. And that's not a static link. That gets updated quite often. So don't just get those links and download them and expect it to stay static. Whenever you're curious, if you ask yourself, does GoldenGate support version XYZ of the database? Go to the link refresh your link to the certification matrix, and you can see if it's been updated or not to support it.
This is Warner, and I am the GoldenGate Product Manager for the Mainframe and all the DB2 platform. First of all, I'm going to talk about the GoldenGate for HP NonStop. And this is one of the Mainframe. Another part of Mainframe is IBM DB2 for ZOS, which is also under the DB2 category. And I want to start a poll and see what kind of HP NonStop platforms for the HP NonStop customers are running right now. Yeah, I know HP NonStop is a platform which dated way back, right? And the GoldenGate actually first started on HP NonStop. So that was back in the late 1990s. And later on in early 2000, we started porting the code to the what we call open system, which covers Oracle, DB2, SQL Server. So very interesting, almost.
If anybody was using ATM machines in the late 1990s, you might have created a GoldenGate transaction back then.
That's right. So I see the majority of customers who responded, probably only 75 of them. Like 3 of them are using non-audited inscribed files. I guess these probably are the base 24 applications. And then we have some customers using the SQL MP, SQL Max. Okay, so that's good. And we are dealing with all these HP NonStop. So the enhancement we did, I want to give you a recap of version 19C, is on the HP NSK side, we did enhance the memory management when we process the large transactions. So we use the KMSF to do the extremely large transaction buffering. And also we limited the software to make sure we're not putting the GoldenGate retrieval files on the system volume or sub-volume to cause the system trouble or even cause the TMF, data volume. So we are, if the user accidentally try to create GoldenGate retrieval files on those system volume or TMF data volumes, we're going to warn them saying those are not allowed to be used. In the same time, we will keep a good heterogeneous operation between HP NonStop and open system. So we added the AES encryption for the retrieval file. So this can be used on both the HP NonStop side and the open system side. And we also added support for the data functions to accept the open system data functions. And we also supported the extract pump to accept upsert, which is like a update insert combined operation from the open system side. So to deal with that gracefully on the HP NonStop side. And we also enhanced the extract, which is pump extract, to detect if there's a missing metadata for the trail record coming from inscribed file, because inscribed file, they can have multiple definitions. Then we will stop the data pump to make sure the right metadata gets included. Otherwise, the open system will not be able to process the data. In we also are working closely with ACI to continue to support the base 24 applications for the T24, D24, and N24. And I noticed some customer in the Q&A have asked whether you guys continue to support those base 24 adapters. The answer is yes, we're going to work with the ACI to continue to support that. And now we're going to take a look at the version 21. So next slide. I'm sorry, the version 21 is only for the DB2. I just have to let everybody know that the HP NonStop, the 19C, is actually the latest version right now. Okay, so this is a big difference between the HP NonStop with all the other open systems. So if you are on the 19C, you're already on the latest release. So now I want to take another poll to see what the DB2 flavors all the audience are using here. So I know DB2, we have the DB2 ZOS, have the DB2 LOW, and also have DB2 for I. And I can see we have much more IBM customer than the HP NonStop customer. And also keep in mind, under the DB2 ZOS, that is under the Mainframe license, right? So we have two Mainframe licenses. One's for HP NonStop, another is DB2 for ZOS. The other two flavors, DB2 for I, and the DB2 for LUW, they are under the non-Oracle licenses. And let's see, so the poll data seems coming in and stopped. And so we have majority of customers are running on ZOS and LUW, and some customers running on I. Okay, so that is an interesting result. So let's go to the next slide, see what we have done for the DB2 for ZOS. So for the version 19C, we actually added a couple enhancements to support, for example, the EOF positioning for the DB2 for ZOS. So you can add extract directly starting from the current redo log. And we support the temporal history tables. And we also supported the timestamp 12. And we actually are the first pioneer to get the DDL awareness added in the DB2 ZOS. As Max just mentioned in the GoldenGate for non-Oracle, we're going to add the data feature in version 23C, but in 21C for the ZOS, we already added the DDL changing tracking. Again, we will not replicate the DDL operation, but we will be DDL change aware. So you do not have to bounce your extract. Extract will notice there's DDL change on the table, so it will use the new metadata to interpret the new record. And we also added enhancement in the long transaction running monitoring. So in the send extract command in the Oracle database, GoldenGate, we have the show trans, skip trans, force trans, this option available back in like 12C. And finally on the DB2 for ZOS, in the 19C, we added this operation, so allow the customer to monitor the open transaction more precisely and can take action on that. And then on 21C, we actually added the parallel replica support to have a better throughput, and also we added a microservice architecture support for the DB2 for ZOS. And another important feature is we reduced the ECSA storage requirement for the extract. Why this is important, I want to show you on the next slide. Because on the ZOS, the memory and the resource is very precious, right? So people do not want to see a lot of applications started using the resource on ZOS. So that's why we introduced the remote capture for ZOS in version 12.3. And then on version 19C and version 21C, we keep fine-tune this architecture to really move all the job as much as possible to the extract running on a open system. And in this diagram, you can see the extract is running on the Linux, connected remotely to the IBM ZOS to get a remote capture from DB2 running on ZOS. And we finally reduced the ECSA usage to only 64 bytes on the DB2 side. So that's a big enhancement we did to make sure the majority of the job is done inside the extract, which is off the ZOS platform. And then we only use as least as possible resource in the ZOS to run the redo log mining part, which is we are calling the IFCID 0306 function call to parse the redo log and send the data back to the extract. So that's the architecture we recommend to all the ZOS customers. Run the GoldenGate remotely, right? So you can run GoldenGate in a cheaper system, either Linux or AIX or Solaris, and then just do remote capture, remote delivery. So that's for the DB2 for ZOS, and we're going to take a look. The next slide is DB2 for I. And this is under the non-Oracle license. So in version 19C, the same thing, we improved the extract efficiency and the throughput, and added the timestamp support, added the same long transaction monitoring for the extract part. And in the 21C, we actually supported the cross-platform capture and the delivery. So right now, if you run the DB2 for I extract, we will support you run that on a Linux and connect to your DB2i to do the remote capture or remote delivery. And we also added IBM i 7.4 support since GoldenGate version 19. And of course, the parallel Replicat feature also get added to allow the better throughput. And then next, I'm going to take a look at the DB2 on LUW. So this is the another popular DB2 version customers using. The similar enhancement we did in 19C, timestamp support and a long-running transaction management. And also in 21C, we added the cross-platform remote capture and remote delivery. So it handles all the cross-instance conversions. Plus, we added the DB2 11.5 support in 21C because there's a lot of customers moving to the new version, and added the parallel Replicat as well. So that's for the DB2 for LOW. And then I'm going to take a look at the 23C for the DB2, and we are going to introduce the microservices for the DB2 for I and the DB2 for LUW, and also introduce the schema change tracking, which is the DDL awareness for both DB2 for I and LUW. And then we will add the special number types as well to make sure it can handle with the special number on the 23C. The next slide will be the more resources to tell you where we can get more information for all the mainframe, for the documentation, and the DB2 for I and LUW. Those are from documentation side, and then there's a general documentation side, and the tutorials live labs, which will give you a lot of useful information, especially for the the new customers coming onto GoldenGate. So that's pretty much conclude the GoldenGate for non-Oracle and for mainframe.